again. And if you have all taken your seats, then I would like to introduce the first speaker of this section, Elisabeth Tiselius from Stockholm University, Sweden, and the title of her talk, which is Power and Control in Multilingual Institutional Encounters, Hum int or A int. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope you stay awake with me now, the last afternoon of the last day of this conference. And thank you for the conference. It's been super interesting and very closer to the mic, okay. And very thought-provoking, so very glad to be here. Before I start, I'm going to shamelessly plug my association. You may or may not know that I'm the president of the European Society for Translation Studies. We don't have as many PhD students in the room as we had, but for all those who work with PhD students, can I please urge you to ask your students to become members? We do so much for promoting translation studies, especially for younger scholars. We work with conference training grant that you can apply for, especially for countries where you have less possibilities to have grants, or independent scholars who have less possibilities. The summer school grants, of course, super useful for PhD students who would like to go to summer schools. The Young Scholar Prize, which I would say is the most prestigious prize for the best thesis. And our Open Access Prize, which is a prize where we actually fund an open access article. And of course, if you want to translate important literature, this is super important for languages who are not English, or let's say who are not English. If you want to spread the books into or from those languages, the translation prize is very useful. And if you haven't used our conference list, go ahead and use it. It's the most comprehensive one. I'm really boasting now, you can hear that, right? And of course, our social media that everyone can access, but if you become a member, you also get the bi-weekly digest and the newsletter. So if you would like to do anything for your PhD students, then ask them to become student members. So much for my boasting, and now on to my research. Okay, so I'm going to start not with using the AI in the interpreted encounter. I'll start with the interpreters using AI, because this is a little bit how it started. We wanted to see what in the public services, where many interpreters do not necessarily use AI or are even very computer literate, how they could benefit from using AI. And this is a joint project with Switzerland, Sweden, and the US. And what we wanted to explore there was how training impacts the use of digital language tools in public service interpreting. We knew that before COVID in 2019 in Switzerland, but I don't think it differs very much from country to country, especially not after what we heard yesterday, right? From the very interesting presentation on immigration interpreting here in Hungary. But we knew from 2019 that less than 20% of public service interpreters use terminology software, and less than 50% of public service interpreters use machine translation tools. So this means that they do not, to a great extent, prepare word lists like their colleagues in the booth. It also means that they do not necessarily use machine translation when they are in a meeting and if they are unsure about what is being said. But this was before COVID, right, and also in Switzerland. So we wanted to look at another country, which is why we at first picked Sweden. And in Sweden, we had a learning activity, a questionnaire, and a focus group. I'm not going to go through the research. I'm just going to cite the results. We found that the most frequent reasons for not using AI before the activities was that they were convinced that they didn't need it. More people used AI after the activities, but they also said that the reason for not using it is because it was bad quality, not practical, and insufficient data protection. So clearly, they learned a lot more about the tools. They also used the tools more, but they were also able to, use them critically. We also found out on the last 3 points of the slide that after the activities, the interpreters were more likely to agree that digital language tools will replace humans, which in a way is a bit of a sad result. So we teach them how to use it, and they become more convinced that they will be replaced by, I should say, full disclosure, I'm not convinced that digital language tools will replace interpreters or translators anytime soon, but they thought so. And also, they were less likely to agree with the statement that digital language tools is easy to explain, or that I'm excited to use digital language tools. They were very happy about the learning activity, but it also created a lot more of reflection, I think, about the digital language tools. We also had focus groups, which were interesting because they said that we taught them how to make glossaries and word lists. Obviously they knew that, but maybe not using the digital language tools. And they discovered that quality differed greatly depending on the chatbot and on the language. So we used both chatbots and machine translation to do this. And in public service interpreting, we don't work very much with English-French, right? Or maybe with English and French as one of the languages, but typically they are small languages of lesser diffusion and so on, or small in the context where the immigrant is, maybe not small in their first country. We also, and this was actually very good discovery for us, that they thought already in the beginning that the data protection was not good enough for them to use the tools. They said that it's difficult that different tools give sources more or less frequently, and maybe not the correct sources either. And also, one thing that could be really useful would, of course, be to feed a document into a tool and then get a summary or a word list, which is, of course, completely impossible if you think about data protection or secrecy in interpreting. So on the one hand, a nice tool, but on the other hand, not possible to use for me. In terms of the practical use, they found that digital language tools was efficient for facts or glossaries in the few minutes between the acceptance of the assignment and the start of the assignment. And for a conference interpreter, this may sound very odd, because you would come prepared, wouldn't you? But for a public service interpreter, they rarely know what they're going to interpret before they enter into the room where they're going to interpret. They might know that it's a hospital, so it's likely to be medical interpreting. But the actual clinic or the actual diagnosis is not revealed to them until they are actually there. So they may have a minute or two before the meeting starts, and during those minute or two, it's really useful to use these type of tools. But also that they need a lot of double checking, and that context is important. And they concluded that they can take very little for granted with the digital language tools, so this means that the interpreter has to be very proactive, which is also, I was happy that this is a conclusion that they draw, but I think it's also important for us to, or maybe after these 3 days it's obvious that this is what it's going to be, but tools are not just there for some kind of magical use. They are still very much, they are probably lighter than the dictionaries we used to use, and we don't have to leaf through the dictionaries, but there are other disadvantages. So after this, we started thinking about what about the users of interpreting? And in interpreting, you may agree with me that there are very few reception studies. We don't think so much about what the users of interpreting think about interpreting. But with digital tools, it becomes really interesting, the reception studies, because it's interesting to know, does it make a difference? Does it make a difference whether there's an interpreter there or whether there is a tool there? So together with a colleague from Belfast, me and my colleague Azar at Stockholm University, we decided to set up this HumInt, or I like to think of it as AINT. Because so far I'm not convinced. Although I must say that the tools that you will see is a very good tool in many respects. Okay. So the aim here was to compare different types of mediation in multilingual institutional encounters. So we focused on a medical encounter, but we're thinking now asylum interviews, police interviews, different types of medical encounters. So everything that an immigrant would encounter in an institutional conversation. And we wanted to look at differences of multilingual, we did medical consultations and whether they are mediated by a human interpreter or an AI interpreter or an app. But they are sold as interpreters now. They are sold as machine interpreters or AI interpreters, aren't they? And we, in our case, maybe we can do this with other groups as well, but we have been looking at patients and nurses. We're also very interested in looking at the cognitive demands in the two conditions. I'm not going to report that here because we did data collection in January, so you will understand that my reporting of this data is going to be very preliminary. But presumably, it could be more cognitive demanding to have an interpreter in the room because there's a third person you have to take into account, or it could be more cognitively demanding that you are the one suddenly responsible for the encounter. Our research questions was whether participants experience differences using a human interpreter or AI interpreter during the medical consultations in terms of information transfer, interpersonal contact, and efficiency. We were not comparing quality here. We didn't look at the two results in the encounter and compare the quality. We wanted to know what they thought about it, whether they were convinced that this was, that the information had gone through or not. And we also wanted to know whether there was an observable difference in the cognitive load then. So, in situations where interpreters are not available, different digital tools may offer temporary solutions and may even be the better option compared to using ad hoc language brokers. This is not a direct quotation, neither from Brown nor from Panayiotou, but they have discussed the fact that we're also, especially in public service interpreting, we must understand that we don't necessarily provide a better option by providing a live interpreter. This is a very hard truth, but this is the way it is. Some public service interpreters are not good at all. Sometimes the institutional person works with the person's aunt or mother or son, and that may not be a viable option, or they may even prefer that option because that was better than the bad interpreter. So when we look at whether is this a change for the better, or is what is better, a real interpreter or an app, the picture is very complex. So therefore we just wanted to understand what is it like. And also, if these digital solutions are going to be viable, they need to be easily accessible and approachable for both parties, and they need to reliably render the utterances in an intelligible way. So the fact that we take out the interpreter and we put an app there means that the persons who are in the encounter now have to handle the app. Is that app easy to handle? Can you do that? Will you understand the app if you're the minority language speakers? And finally, I think, yes, finally from the background, it's also all the paralinguistic signals, right? Because a human-driven conversation is guided by paralinguistic signals. We use tone, pitch, loudness, gesture, gaze, posture, and interaction between the participants. We know when to change the turns because we drive that. And if you observe, as many colleagues have done before me, if you observe the interpreted encounter, the interpreter also drives that, because the two primary participants will intuitively know when the interpreter needs to interpret because they start to move or draw their breath or something like that. So it's often, with a good interpreter, it's a very smooth interaction. And this is taken away. So these signals and the interaction patterns, who are culturally and linguistically different, they are also likely to change when we put a machine in the middle. But obviously we don't know how and whether they do until we actually look at it. So the design was the following. We had a simulated encounter, but we didn't have a manuscript. So we wanted it to be as close to reality as possible, but still simulated, because otherwise it would be too complicated with the informed consent and ethical approval and so on. We used 6 real nurses with emergency room or ambulance experience, so they are the ones who do the first screening of people. We had 16 patients with no or limited Swedish. They were our international students who actually were so happy to participate. I've rarely had so easy to recruit participants as when I recruited these international students. And they came because we offer, at my department, we offer a Swedish course for them. But this was before they started the Swedish course. So when we sent the information about the Swedish course, we also sent the information about, would you like to participate in an experiment? I had many more than I recruited, but I wanted viable groups, so therefore it became English, French, Italian, and German. They had 4 different symptoms, so we prepped them with the symptoms: headache, stomachache, nausea, and dizziness. I told them how long they had it, which medication they had tried, if they had previous medical history. They were so good actors, by the way. They also added in so much more medical history. And so very authentic conversations, although not authentic. We had 4 interpreters. They all had interpreter education and state authorization. One was even state authorized as a medical interpreter. And 2 patients per nurse was mediated by a human interpreter, and 2 patients per nurse was mediated by an app. And the app we used is this one. It's called Mabel Care. And Mabel is for medical Babel. They sell it very happily as an absolutely viable solution instead of an interpreter. They don't necessarily say that everything should go on without interpreters, but they say that this is good enough for not having an interpreter there. And I would also say that it is not a very bad app. It's domain specific, so it doesn't cover all the languages, because they really steer the data sets they put into the app are controlled for being medical data and symptoms lists and medical lists. Sorry? Mabel Care, M-A-B-E-L. So medical Babel, Mabel. It can run without internet connection, so you can put it on your phone or your iPad, and you can have a complete closed system, which is then from a data protection perspective very good. It does not use the APIs of Google or Meta or whoever provides the API, so that is also closed off from the general shared system, which also makes it very secure. It also provides both, it works on automatic speech recognition, of course, and it provides a translation and then a back translation. So when you see it here, you will have your own original at the top, and then the translation, and then at the bottom, now it's not shown on this picture, but at the bottom after the Arabic translation, it would also be a back translation into English. So this means that you can check whether what you said was correctly translated or not. And you can also choose whether you want to read the text or whether you want it to orally reproduce what has been translated. So really a neat app. We did a pre- and post-task questionnaire for the participant when we asked about language background, experience of using with interpreters, experience of using different language apps, and we used post-task interviews when and the post-task questionnaire was about their experience of using this particular app. The post-task interview was asking them whether they felt that the message came across and how they perceived working with the app or with the interpreter. We did video recordings from 2 angles, and we had eye tracking glasses on all participants. And now I'm going to show you 2 pictures. They have signed informed consent that I can use this for educational purposes. And I have sort of pseudonymized them, but please don't take pictures, okay? So this is what the setup looks like. This is the right-hand camera. There's also a left-hand camera where we would see the, this is the left-hand camera. There's also a right-hand camera where we would see the nurse better. So it's the nurse to the left, the international students to the right, and the interpreter in the middle. And you can see that they all have glasses. We also had documents, so there was a sort of reading section for the documents. And this is what it looked like with the app. So where the interpreter sat, there's nobody, and in the middle you have the app which is placed in between the nurse and the patient, and they both read from it. So these are my extremely preliminary results, which is basically only based on the results from the interviews, but also a little bit from the video recordings. What's interesting is that there was not 100% clear preference of using the interpreter. More people were happier with the interpreter, but some said it's actually good not to think about the third person in the room. When we asked them how they checked that the translation was correct or that the patient had gotten the information they wanted to convey, they said that they looked at the patient's reactions. Not all of them did, but several said, I look at how the patient reacts, and then I know whether they understood what I said or not, which is really a deceitful way of checking the correctness, isn't it? And this is despite the fact that they actually had the back translation, and also that the back translation at times were wrong, and we can see in the video that they react to the fact that it was wrong, and they have to restart all that to get it right. And in some occasion, the back translation was even showing so there was an error in the translation, but when it was back translated, the error was hidden. So it back translated back into more or less what the nurse had said or what the patient had said. So that's also a little bit deceitful. We also, this is not on the slide, but we also discovered that most of the translation was done in relay via English. One of the most pertinent things there was that when we had a conversation from Swedish to Spanish, the nurse said that if this deteriorates, you have to call 112. And that was translated into Spanish to, if this deteriorates, you have to call 911. And one can assume that had this been a real situation, the nurse would have seen 911 in the back translation, and she would have, or in the translation because it was with figures, and she would have reacted. But on the other hand, had she missed that, that might have been very important information loss. All the participants read from the app rather than asking it to speak. This was, of course, because all the patients were fast readers. They were university students. I assumed that this would look different depending on who you had in the room. But one thing that surprised me was that there are really long reading lags. So one of the things that we want to look into is how does this long reading lag affect the conversation? I mean, there is the interpreter in the room who also takes a lag when they are sort of working, but then you are still part of the conversation. Whereas in the reading, you saw it on the picture, there's a complete silence for a long, long time when both of them read and sort of decides whether this is acceptable or not, and then have to restart if they want to redo the translation. We also saw many instances of trust issues where they both agree without sharing the language that this was not correct. So they laugh a little, or they sort of say that they have to restart, or and they also said that they don't trust the app. That was very obvious in the post interviews. They don't trust the app, but not to the point where they wouldn't use it. Interestingly enough. I talked about the long reading time, and also the gaze interaction is really interesting, because when the interpreter is there, we all teach our students in public service interpreting that they shouldn't take over the gaze, so that, you know, the interpreter looks a little bit to the other side so that the two people in front of each other can actually gaze at each other, because gaze is so strong. So if the interpreter really looks at someone, that person will look back. So we saw that in the interaction with the interpreter as well, how they look at the interpreter, they look at the patient, but it is all the time this gaze interaction. Whereas with the app, they read. They hardly look at each other. They're either busy with, you know, doing looking at, when they speak, they look at the speech recognition in the app. And when the app has translated, they look at the translation, and then the other person speak, and then they look at what happens in the app, so they don't look at each other's reaction. Now, this may also be different in a real encounter, because we know that there was nothing was at stake here, right? It's still a simulated encounter. But I still find it interesting that if the nurse tells me that I look at the patient's reactions to see if they got the message, but they don't look at the patient because I can see in the film that they only look at the app, then I'm wondering what is happening here. Yeah. And that's as far as I have gotten on this experiment, but next time we'll see each other, I can hopefully also report on the cognitive load. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. We will take questions at the end of the session. So, I was so immersed in your story that I forgot to look at the time, but you were perfectly within the frames. So it is my task to announce the next speaker, Agnieszka Chmiel. Please pronounce your name at the beginning of your talk so that we can learn the pronunciation properly. She is from the Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznan, Poland, and she's going to talk about the booth, cooperation in the virtual booth during remote simultaneous interpreting. So the floor is yours, and Szilárd will open it for you.
Oh, yeah, this is the one, yes. Okay, all right, thanks. Fantastic. Thank you very much, yes. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here, and I would like to thank the organizers for this really nice invitation. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Agnieszka Chmiel, very good pronunciation. Chmiel means hops in Polish, and if you change it to Chmiel, which is how people sometimes pronounce my name, I get changed from hops to a bumblebee, okay? But still nice, okay? Still nice. All right. I'm going to take you back a few years in time to the pre-chat GPT world, when the community of interpreters was enraged, excited, very much interested with RSI, remote simultaneous interpreting, because of the pandemic, which brought this major change to the interpreting community. You see just my name here, but this project is very much a joint venture. There are 8 people involved in the project, some of them in Italy, some of them in Poland. So I just wanted to acknowledge my fantastic research team and my co-PI, Dr. Spinolo from University of Bologna. Okay, this project was funded by AIC because when the pandemic struck, everybody was interested in how RSI would influence interpreting jobs, interpreting assignments. And we put up this research project to explore RSI in terms of user perception, and the user was the actual interpreter, so we were interested in the interpreter's perception of this working environment, performance, of course, cognitive load, and stress. And previous studies that were conducted in the early 2000s show that if you compare online to on-site interpreting, of course, people would prefer on-site interpreting because when they interpret remotely, they feel their sense of presence is largely limited, right? So they don't really feel they are in the conference room. And also, largely, interpreters felt that their performance was worse in RSI, and they got tired much earlier than in a regular interpreting booth. And previous research on RSI shows us mainly all of these. Previous research has been based mainly on surveys that kind of mushroomed during the pandemic, but also some experimental studies as well. So we see worse performance and worse working conditions in RSI. We also see that interpreters see RSI as a challenge, but also as an opportunity. For instance, you can juggle 2 assignments on a single day, and you can do the laundry in between, for instance, if you're at home. And we see that objectively measured performance is similar, although interpreters themselves feel that they perform worse in remote simultaneous interpreting. And when it comes to stress, remote interpreting is perceived as more stressful, although objective psychophysiological measures don't really show us this result. So it's all in the interpreters' heads, we could say. There have also been studies on AI support showing that if the machine gives you prompts in the form of numbers or terminology from your glossary, you perform much better. But we've also seen many colleagues showing the difficulties in handover, right? You cannot really nudge your colleague as you do sometimes in a regular booth because it frequently happens that you don't even see your colleague and you cannot really hear your colleague. So it's quite difficult to manage handover. And this is Marta's research. Emotional importance of having a boothmate is an important thing, and I want you to remember this result because it will be interesting to look at it in the context of the data I'm going to present, right? So interpreters largely felt that if they have this somebody next to them, they feel less stressed. They know that they can rely on the support of another colleague who's sitting next to them, and that's kind of important for your well-being in the booth. And of course, good sound was also a big issue a few years ago. Speakers providing input in sometimes horrendous quality, which has led to many problems with tinnitus and hearing impairment on the part of interpreters. But interestingly, there have been very few studies to show this actual result in objective terms. Now, when it comes to this research, we wanted to see, we didn't really want to compare on-site to online interpreting. We wanted to look more closely at various RSI settings, and we wanted to see how the fact whether your boothmate is co-located or not affects interpreters' performance and stress. So whether this emotional support is felt by interpreters or not. And we also wanted to see how interpreters cope with complex visual input. Although in this presentation, I won't be really focusing on our eye tracking data so much. So what did we measure? We measured a lot of things. We measured interpreting accuracy, not quality overall, because it's always very difficult, but accuracy measured through some problem triggers that I'm going to show you in a moment. We used NASA TLX for self-reported cognitive load and performance, STAI scale for subjective measures of stress, and then we used psychophysiological measures of stress, which are electrodermal activity and heart rate. And I'm going to show you what the actual setup looked like in a moment. This is NASA TLX, for those of you who do not know the tool. It's a very simple scale where you basically judge your mental demand, physical demand, temporal demand, for instance, how hurried or rushed the pace of the task was for you, performance, effort, and frustration, so how frustrated you were with that particular task, which is also some kind of a correlate of the difficulty. And STAI, Trait Anxiety Inventory, it's a psychometric tool. Again, it's a pen and paper test where you basically describe your own state, whether you feel calm, secure, upset, nervous, self-confident, etc. This is our study design. It was a within participant design, meaning that each interpreter had to interpret 3 separate assignments, 3 separate mini conferences that involved the main presentation and a short Q&A. And within each mini conference, we had the audiovisual portion where they only saw the speaker, the audiovisual with slides portion where they saw both the speaker and the slides. We had a chat portion. This was Q&A where a delegate would ask a question via a chat box for the event. And then the audio segment, which was also part of the Q&A, where a delegate would ask question orally, but without being seen. So it frequently happens that people would ask questions. They don't switch on their cameras because they're wearing their pajamas. So they just turn their mics on and they ask questions. So we wanted to mimic what happens in a regular a remote conference. And we did all that in 3 conditions. So the first one is the co-located condition, right? So the boothmate is next to you, sitting next to you, as if you were interpreting on-site, although the speaker is remote. Then the not co-located condition, where your boothmate is somewhere else, and the only means of communication with your boothmate is a chat box. Okay, so you use a chat, and this is how your boothmate gives you prompts. And then the GT stands for Green Terp, which is a virtual booth application where you can actually see your boothmate. You are seen by your boothmate as well. You have a chat with your boothmate, but you can also communicate orally without being heard by the delegate. So it's a virtual booth. It's something in between, right? You have more access, both visual and auditory, to your boothmate. He or she is not next to you, but there's much more opportunity for successful communication. And this is what the interpreter actually saw in all of those conditions. So you see in the co-located condition, you see the speaker, you see the slides and the event chat. In the not collocated condition, which is a bit more visually complex, you see everything that you see in the collocated condition plus the booth chat. So this is where your boothmate gives you prompts for numbers, terms, etc. And the virtual condition, which is at the bottom, which is the most visually complex condition, because apart from the slides, the speaker, the event chat, and the booth chat, you also actually see your fellow interpreter. You can see yourself as well. You have some controls where you can set the volume of the floor and of your boothmate if the boothmate is the active interpreter. So it's much more visually complex. And this is the actual setup in the lab, and this is me during the piloting stage playing the role of the interpreter, and you see a lot of wires, right? Because this is where the psychophysiological data comes from. What I have here is 2 sensors on my 2 fingers for galvanic skin response, which is basically the electric activity of the skin, which is heightened when you are stressed and you start sweating. Also, I had 2 sensors on my chest. I think they were like this, for my heart data. Because, of course, when you're stressed out, your heart rate is higher. And the black thingy in the middle is the eye tracker, because we also monitored eye movements. And the person sitting next to me is the boothmate. And, of course, the boothmate was the researcher as well, right? The interpreters didn't know that the boothmate was actually a researcher who knew exactly what kind of role they should play. So they didn't actually offer prompts for everything. They didn't write down every single number because we wanted to manipulate whether the prompts are given by the boothmate or not. Okay, so it was a bit frustrating to the interpreters during the task because they were expecting assistance from their boothmate, and at some points the boothmate could not give that assistance because this is how the study worked. So in terms of ecological validity, you see this is far from what you experience in real life, but this is the compromise you have to make if you want to have a well-controlled experimental study. And this is the not co-located condition, so the interpreter is sitting at the desk, but there's also one more person in the room, the researcher, who is monitoring the data, making sure we have all the data from the interpreter. So again, just to show you that it was far removed from a real working environment. Now, the materials that we had in our study, we had 3 speeches that were part of a mini conference. You have the duration here and the speed. These were originally prepared in English for the English-Polish part of the experiment, and then they were translated into Spanish for the Spanish-Italian part of the experiment, because we had those 2 language combinations in Italy and in Poland. And all of the interpreters were working into the A language from their B or C language. When it comes to problem triggers that were used for accuracy measurements, the speeches included numbers, proper names, and low-frequency terms. So we used certain terms that were really rare, and we used specific corpora to make sure that these were really low-frequency terms. And half of the numbers were prompted by the boothmate, half of them were not. The same for proper names. When it comes to low-frequency terms, these were things like Chinese mitten crab, and I'm sure the interpreters are happy now that they got the slides well in advance, right? And top-mouth gudgeon, right? This is not a a term you would use frequently unless you're an avid, I don't know, a lover of marine life or river life or whatever. I don't know where this fish lives, actually, right? So these were really low-frequency terms, and they were all prompted by the boothmate, right? The boothmate had learned the names, and they would offer the translation to the interpreters. In general, we had 36 participants, 15 for the Spanish-Italian combination and 21 for English-Polish combination, and they were pretty seasoned interpreters. Their average age was about 40, work experience 14 years, and you see the language proficiency for either Polish or Italian and Spanish and English, self-reported or objectively measured by Lexdale, the English Lexdale test or the Spanish Lexdale test. So I think pretty good interpreters. Some of them, I don't remember the exact numbers, but some of them were active IEC members as well. Not all of them, but some of them. We also asked them about their RSI experience and how they work with their boothmates. And the majority, as you can see here, work in the home office. So this bar with a co-located boothmate, with a remote boothmate, right? That was the most frequent setting, okay? And we also asked them how, if they have a not co-located boothmate, how do they cooperate with the boothmate? So the majority of them said either they have a chat on a remote interpreting platform or an external chat on a separate device. So usually that would be a WhatsApp channel used on a smartphone. That would be the most frequent setup. Now, to our predictions. What we wanted to see, or what we expected, was that we thought that performance would be the highest in the co-located condition. All right, so you have your boothmate next to you, communication is really smooth, that means your performance is the best, and it should be the worst in the not co-located condition. When it comes to cognitive load and stress, we thought that the not co-located condition would be the most demanding and the most stressful, because you don't see your boothmate. The only way to communicate with the boothmate is the chat, and basically it's a one-way communication. You don't have time to chat to your boothmate in this condition, and it would be the lowest in the co-located condition where your boothmate is next to you, because this is the familiar setup for that you know from on-site interpreting. For our analyses, we used inferential statistics, so linear mixed effects models and some correlations, and you see again all the dependent variables, so all the measurements that we collected in this study, and let me show you some results. Now, when it comes to accuracy, you see the accuracy in co-located and virtual conditions was similar, 80%. In the not co-located condition, it was 78. You might think it's a very tiny difference, but statistics tells us that this is actually a significant difference, right? So we can say that the performance was higher in the co-located and virtual condition than in the not co-located condition, which actually shows that if your boothmate is present via a virtual booth, it's okay, right? The only setting that would actually decrease your performance as an interpreter is the not co-located setting, where communication is more difficult. We also wanted to look at the boothmate assistance, right? So whether there was a difference when the interpreters got prompts from the boothmate or not. And of course, for the terms, we don't have the data because all the terms were prompted, right? We didn't want to be that nasty to our interpreters, not to help them with the top mouth gudgeon. So when it comes to numbers, you can see it was, and proper names as well, performance was better with prompted, so with a boothmate assistance, but it was still high. Like for numbers that were not really given by the boothmate, the accuracy was over 70%, and it was much higher than for proper names, which actually shows that interpreters are well trained in, you know, when they hear a number, they know, oh, this is going to be difficult, so they focus a lot on numbers, and everybody knows that, you know, numbers, you should be really careful and really focused on the numbers. And a really interesting effect, namely, we found a language pair effect in accuracy. So, interestingly, the Spanish-Italian interpreters were better than Polish-English interpreters, and we were wondering why, okay? They had similar experience, so what was the reason? Well, the reason was this. Okay, the numbers in Spanish, Italian, right? These are basically cognates, right? So it's actually very easy to interpret those in this language combination, which is not really true for English, Polish, right? So this was something that I only discovered during the study, because I don't speak Italian or Spanish. I had no idea that they were so similar. Okay, which actually makes a really interesting language combination for further experiments if you're interested in numbers and interpreting. When it comes to subjective measures of cognitive load, so NASA TLX, remember, where they were supposed to say how demanding the task was, we found no difference between the three conditions. The only difference was in the self-reported performance. And this was, performance was scored as the worst in the not collocated condition. And if you remember the objective scores of accuracy, this was the lowest condition. So their feeling had some backing in the actual data, right? They felt, I wasn't performing that well. And this was actually true if you look at the objective data. When it comes to stress, in general, stress, again, self-reported, was judged as moderate to low. Okay, so they were not really, you know, they were seasoned interpreters, so they were not really stressed by this assignment, and there were no differences between conditions, right? So subjectively, no difference. And now for the psychophysiological data, EDA, so the sweating on the fingers. There were 4 measures, and we only had an effect in one of the measures, which is skin conductance response count. And this is a very interesting effect. Namely, they were stressed the most in the co-located condition. Okay, which is surprising, right? Because your study showed that at least what they said, right? What they voiced was that we want to have a boothmate co-located because it gives us emotional support, right? But in this particular study, they were more stressed out when a boothmate was there, right? And we have some explanations for that. Maybe it was because the boothmate was previously unknown to them, right? So it's always difficult to work with a new person, but then professional interpreters do work with various colleagues all the time, right? So it shouldn't be an issue. Then we thought maybe it was because they couldn't negotiate the terms of cooperation with the boothmate, right? Usually when you have a new boothmate, you say, oh, I want you to write down numbers for me, or you say, oh, I don't want you to write down anything because it's distracting to me, right? In this particular case, they couldn't negotiate those terms of cooperation because it was all set. We wanted to have a very nicely controlled experiment, so we just said, this is what's going to happen, and that's it. So maybe that was the reason. But again, this should be visible in other conditions as well, right? So we thought that the explanation would be that for the co-located condition, they had to navigate visually a much wider space, not just looking at the screen, but also looking at the physical notepad that the interpreter was presenting. So maybe that was the reason why they were so stressed out, or maybe that was just the physical presence of another human being Okay, we don't know. And there was also an effect of slides. So when there were slides, when they had more visuals, the stress was lower. And that was for the majority of conditions. And this, this result was also visible in the heart rate data. Okay, so when they had visuals, their heart rate was slower, they were less stressed out, and again, in the co-located condition with a human being next to them, they were more stressed. So the heart rate was higher. And this is just to show you very quickly where they were looking at. When there were no slides, they were generally looking at the speaker in all of the conditions. When there were slides, they were obviously looking at the slides. When there was a written question in the chat box, they were basically doing simultaneous interpreting with text. So they were looking at the text as it was read out by the moderator at a conference. And when there was an auditory question asked by a delegate who did not switch on their camera, they were looking at the speaker. And these were our predictions, so we thought that the co-located condition would lead to the best performance and the lowest stress. And what we saw was that actually performance was similar in the co-located condition and the virtual booth condition, and cognitive load and subjective stress were very similar, but objectively measured stress was higher in the co-located condition, right? And a bonus question, in case you were wondering whether interpreters look at themselves during RSI, if they have a chance. So in the virtual booth, they could also see themselves. What do you think? Yes, they do, right? For 5% of the time, right? So even though they're working really hard, you know, they still have time to check themselves out, okay? That was a kind of interesting finding of the study. Okay, so to conclude, interpreters we found, also by looking at eye tracking data that I did not present here, successfully navigate a very complex visual environment, right? Remember the virtual booth, a lot happening on the screen, plus they were looking at themselves as well. We found similar accuracy for the virtual and co-located boothmate condition, and worse for the not co-located boothmate. No difference in subjective measures except for performance, and objective measures show increased stress in the co-located condition. So maybe interpreters are ready for artificial boothmates, right? Maybe a human being is not really needed there anymore. Just a question. If you're interested in more data, some of the data has already been published, some has not, so this is where it has been published. I wanted to thank my fantastic team once again, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka, for this excellent presentation. In the last presentation in this section, we're going to have the lead interpreter at the Hungarian Gazette Publishing and Legal Translation Center, our partner organizer for this day, Éva Zilahi, and she's going to talk about natural and artificial intelligence in legal interpreting. The floor is yours, Éva. Szeretettel várunk ide.
Jó napot kívánok, vagy jó kellemes délutánt, így az utolsó előadóként remélem maradt még annyi energia önökben, hogy kitartsanak és végighallgassák az én prezentációmat is, aminek a témája a természetes és a mesterséges intelligencia a hatósági tolmácsolásban. Bele is csapok az elejébe rögtön, Mindannyian tudjuk, hogy a hatósági vagy bírósági tolmácsolásnak a célja az, hogy a nyelvi akadályokat legyőzze minden típusú és fajta hatósági eljárásban, és erre az Európai Unióban külön törvényi szabályozás is van, ami lehetővé teszi minden polgár számára, hogy a hatósági eljárásban saját anyanyelvén járjon el, illetve azon védekezzen, illetve azon terjesszen elő bármilyen beadványt. Az MKIFK-nak a hatósági tolmácsolásban van egy külön ellátási kötelezettsége Budapest közigazgatási területén belül, és azért hangsúlyozom, hogy hatósági tolmácsolás és nem csupán bírósági tolmácsolás, mivel a tolmácsaink nem csupán a bíróságokon vannak jelen, hanem ugyanígy jelen vannak akár az ügyészségen, a rendőrségeken, az adóhatóságnál, a büntetés végrehajtási intézetekben, kormányhivatalokban, vagy akár a KAV vizsgákon, ami a közlekedés alkalmassági vizsgát jelenti. Tehát, ha valaki jogosítványt szeretne szerezni, vagy gépkezelői jogosítványra van szüksége, ez szintén az MKIFK tolmácsait veszi igénybe. Azt gondolom, hogy önmagában a hatósági vagy bírósági tolmácsolásról azért már szép számban született irodalom, akár dr. Horváth Ildikóra gondolunk, akár például Puklus Mártának pont most jelent meg egy nagyon kiváló kötete a bírósági tolmácsolásról, ami a gyakorlati részét feszegeti, és nagyon sok hasznos leírást és példát tartalmaz. Mindannyian tudjuk, hogy a tolmácsolás, a hatósági tolmácsolás esetében gyakorlatilag az összes típusú tolmácsolást felöleli, akár gondolunk a szinkron tolmácsolásra, vegyük most a Nürnbergi per kapcsán megjelent filmben is láthatjuk, hogy ott szinkron tolmácsolás történt. A konszekutív tolmácsolás egy teljesen bevett és általános tolmácsolási forma. A gyakorlottabb tolmácsolások azok nyilván fülbesúgással haladjunk tempóba próbálnak túljutni az eseményen, illetve a legkedvencebb a blattolás. Amit azért a tolmácsok valljuk be annyira nem szeretnek, főleg úgy, hogyha soha nem látták a szöveget, és eléjük tolják, hogy na most akkor ezt fel kell olvasni idegen nyelven, vagy éppen az idegen nyelvű szöveget magyarul. A mai világban tudjuk jól, hogy a tolmácsolás ugyanúgy, ahogy a fordítás során a tolmácsolásban is felmerült a mesterséges intelligencia használata. Ezt a mai napon is rengeteget hallottunk, rengeteg kutatást hallottunk róla, rengeteg érdekes adatot ismerhettünk meg ezzel kapcsolatban, és nyilvánvalóan rengeteg olyan segédeszköz, olyan eszköz áll már rendelkezésre, ami úgymond kiváltja a humán tolmácsot. Egyértelműen költséghatékony lehet beruházni egy bármilyen tolmácsgépre, akár egy fülbedugósra, akár egy dobozosra, kicsire, nagyra, ez is gondolom olyan lesz majd idővel, mint a telefonok voltak annak idején a mobiltelefonon, hogy először egy nagy táskát hordoztunk, utána most már gyakorlatilag elveszik egy női táskában. Igen ám, de vajon ezek a tolmácsgépek mennyire humánusak a szó legszorosabb értelmében? Mennyire tudják applikálni azokat az alapelveket, amik a teljesség igénye nélkül a tolmácsolásban, és főleg a hatósági tolmácsolásban abszolút alapelvként működnek, és abszolút betartandók. Akár a környezetfelismerés vagy értékelés, az interakció, a helyzeti felismerés, a kreatív probléma megoldás. Ezek azért annyira emberi tulajdonságok, hogy én úgy gondolom, hogy még a mesterséges intelligencia idáig nem jutott el. És igen, vannak dolgok, vannak elvek, amik applikálhatók, mint ahogy a professzionális viselkedés. Valószínű, hogy egy gép soha nem fog megjelenni egy oda nem illő öltözetbe, nem fog orrot fújni közben például, vagy mondhatnám a nyelvi pontosságot, ami a leadott szöveghez képest valóban biztos, hogy egy gép is nagyon alkalmas lesz rá, hogy ezt visszaadja. Biztos, hogy a gép semleges lesz, abban az esetben, ha tudja és felismeri a semlegességet, és biztos, hogy titkot fog tartani, mert otthon nem fogja elmondani anyának, apának, hogy hú, képzeld el, mi történt. És mivel én önmagam is több mint 30 éve tolmácsolok hatósági eljárásokban, és látom, hogy a kollégák közül is nagyon sok olyan kolléga van itt, aki hatósági eljárások során tolmácsol, ezért ahelyett, hogy kutatási eredményeket vagy konklúziókat vonnék le, szeretnék bemutatni néhány olyan esetet, ami abszolút jellemző a szakmánkra, abszolút jellemző arra, ahogy folyik egy hatósági eljárás, jelen esetben bírósági eljárás, és kíváncsi lennék majd a végén az önök véleményére, hogy vajon ezeknek a mesterséges intelligencia általi kiváltását mennyire látják önök, vagy akár mi mindannyian, lehetségesnek akár a közeljövőben. Én most bevallom, hogy nem tartom valószínűnek. Nézzünk egy teljesen egyszerű esetet, ami egy polgári peres eljárás. A vállás. Azaz a házasság felbontása. Na most azért azt belátjuk, akár vált már valaki az életében, akár nem bontott fel házasságot, hogy egy házasság felbontása az mindig azért egy kissé, úgymond stresszes esemény, főleg úgy, hogy azért a felek nagyon nagy része soha életében nem járt bíróságon, nem járt hatóságnál, nem volt hatósági eljárás alá vonva, tehát fogalma nincs, hogy mi történik ilyen helyen, arról már nem beszélve, hogy a két fél ellentéte annyira nyilvánvaló, hiszen meg akarnak szüntetni egy életközösséget. Ennek a nehezített példája, amikor a család elkíséri támogatólag a feleket. A feleknek épp elég önmagukért helytállni, épp elég olyan kínos helyzetbe kerülni, hogy kiteregessék a magánéletüket egy vadidegen ember előtt, a bíró vagy az ülnökek előtt, vagy bár a tolmács előtt, bárki előtt. Na, ehhez jön a család, aki minden áron jót akar, és minden áron be akarja bizonyítani, hogy a másik fél a hibás, a másik fél a rossz, és akkor még szerencse, hogyha ez nem bent a tárgyalóteremben történik, hanem mondjuk már a tárgyalás szünetében, vagy az ítélethozatal előtt. A legkellemetlenebb, amikor egy ilyen helyzetben a család beavatkozik, és próbálja a saját igazát erősíteni. Abban a pillanatban megszűnik minden nyelvi akadály. Előjön a hangzavar, mindenki a saját igazát bizonygatja. Teljesen mindegy, hogy milyen nyelvű a másik fél. Azt mindenki el tudja mondani azon a másik nyelvet, amit ő szeretne. Itt már nyelvi korlát nincs. Na most kérdezem én, hogy ezt a mesterséges intelligencia hogy oldja meg? Mert én, mint tolmács, remélem elég bölcsen, szépen hátralépek, és nem várom meg a pofoszkodást, hogy én is részese legyek, mert sajnos ilyen is előfordul, hanem szépen hátralépek, maximum próbálom csittítani a feleket, éppen azon a nyelven, amelyik a számra jön ebben az esetben, hiszen itt mindenki mindent ért. És bizony nagyon sokszor van olyan, hogy hiába van jelen biztonsági őr, akik járnak tolmácsolni ilyen eljárásokra, tudják, hogy nagyon-nagyon sok esetben az utóbbi években a házasság felbontási pereknél automatikusan megjelenik a folyosón a biztonsági ember, a biztonsági őr, és vigyáz a felek békés elválására. Sokszor bizony tettlegességbe is torkollik az eset, és ilyenkor nem tud a tolmács mit csinálni, de úgy gondolom, hogy a mesterséges intelligencia sem tudna mit csinálni. A házasság felbontásának egy Másik folyamánya a gyermekelhelyezés. A gyermekelhelyezés, ami egy teljesen speciális feladat, és erre önmagában magára a gyermekelhelyezési perre, a gyermekekkel való tolmácsolásra nem is szeretnék most kitérni, mert az egy egész estés műsor lenne, de például Bogácsi Anett kolléganőnk ezt kutatja, és hát reméljük, hogy előbb vagy utóbb mi is megismerjük ezeket a kutatásokat, és tudunk majd belőle építkezni a jövőben, amikor ilyen perekre kerül a sor. De ismertetnék egy esetet, ami velem történt meg, és egy nagyon kellemetlen helyzetbe kerültem. A felperes jogi képviselővel jelent meg. Az alperesnek nem volt jogi képviselője, ő volt az idegen nyelvű fél, viszont az első 1,5 percben kiderült, hogy az alperes semmilyen nyelven nem érti a jogi nyelvet. A képességei sajnos nem voltak olyanok, hogy felfogja és egyáltalán érzékelje a helyzetet, amiben van, annak súlyosságát, annak komolyságát. Nem volt jogi képviselője, sem támasza, aki felkészítette volna vele, hogy mi a tétje az egész eljárásnak. A bíró többször figyelmeztette az alperest, amit én, mint tolmács, többször letolmácsoltam és elmondtam neki. Az alperes időnként a telefonján játszott, időnként elbámészkodott a madarakra a kinti fán, nem volt jelen egyáltalán a tárgyaláson. Egy ilyen távol lévő pillanatában újra figyelmeztettem, bírói figyelmeztetés nélkül, hogy legyen szíves, figyeljen oda, mert a bíró kérdést tett fel neki. Amire a felperes ügyvédje nem volt rest, azonnal felugrott, és óvást nyújtott be a tolmács ellen, azzal, hogy a tolmács figyelmezteti az alperest a válaszadásra, hogy mit kell válaszolnia. Nyilvánvalóan erről szó sem volt, és én is csak első pillanatban megrökönyödötten álltam, hogy most mi van? Mi történt? Ez egy kisváros volt, kisváros bírósága, ahol azért az általam tolmácsolt nyelvet ismerték többen is, így megkértem a bírót, hogy állítsuk meg a tárgyalást, és tegyük már meg, hogy behívunk valakit, aki beszéli a nyelvet, és hála Istennek a drága jó magyar technikának, ahol még kazettás magnon rögzítjük az elhangzottakat, kértem, hogy játsszuk vissza azt, amit tolmácsoltam. Pillanatokon belül be is jött egy szolga, aki letolmácsolta azt, amit én letolmácsoltam, úgy, ahogy azt az alperes is közölte a bíróval, hogy én mit mondtam. Itt egyértelművé vált, hogy semmilyen etikai vétséget és semmilyen egyéb vétséget nem követtem el. Ekkor az ügyvéd nagy lelkesen mondta, hogy jó, akkor lépjünk tovább, ne foglalkozzunk vele. Hát igen ám. És hol van a tolmács tisztessége? Hol van a professzionalizmus? Ha a következő tárgyalásra úgy megyek oda, hogy azt mondják, hogy aha, ezt a tolmácsot óvták meg, az engem egy életre megbélyegez. A szakmai karrieremnek ennyi. Úgyhogy kénytelen voltam megkérni a bíró urat, hogy legyen olyan kedves, és vegye jegyzőkönyvbe, hogy a felperesi óvás nem volt helyén való. Nem állta meg a helyét, a tolmácsolás professzionális volt és hibátlan volt. Úgyhogy a jegyzőkönyvezésnek is bizony megvan a maga előnye, hogyha jegyzőkönyvet vezetünk egy tárgyalásról. Most kérdezem én, hogy ha ez az eset úgy történik, hogy a mesterséges intelligencia tolmácsol, meddig jutottunk volna el ebben? Hogy végződött volna ez az eljárás? És ez egy polgári eljárás, ahol nem években mérik a tolmácsolás pontosságát, viszont emberi életek múlnak rajta. Elnézést, valahogy visszajöttem még jobban. Aztán vegyünk egy nehezített pályát, ami én azt gondolom, hogy a tolmácsoknak nem ismeretlen, de aki nem tolmácsol ilyen helyen, az azért annyira nem látja át ezt a helyzetet. Amikor van egyszerre 5 vádlott, ami lehet 3, lehet 7, de mindig előfordul olyan, és elég gyakran, hogy több vádlott van. Na most állítólag mindegyik úgy nyilatkozott annak idején, hogy tud magyarul, természetesen, hogy ne tudna magyarul, odamész, és akkor pontosan tudod, hogy senki. Közülük maximum egy. Az is csak a konyha nyelvet. A jogi nyelvhez biztos, hogy nem ért egyikük sem, hiszen ha értenének hozzá, akkor ismernék a jogot, és eleve nem kerültek volna ilyen helyzetbe az esetek nagy részében. Tehát ott van 5 ember, és mind az 5-nek tolmácsolnia kell. Költséghatékonyság, 1 tolmács az 5 embernek. Minden ügyvédnek és minden vádlottnak joga van konzultálni egymással a tárgyalás előtt. Tehát minden egyes ügyvéddel és vádlottal elvonul a tolmács, konzultálnak, tolmács vissza, újabb páros, elvonulnak, konzultálnak, vissza. Igen, mindegyiknek joga van hozzá, és mindegyiket letolmácsoljuk. Viszont a részlehajlásnak még csak a halvány jele sem jelenhet meg. Ugyanakkor ott a tárgyaláson, ott ül az összes ügyvéd, az összes vádlott, és mindenkinek a mondását, a beszédét le kell tolmácsolni. Nagyon-nagyon sok esetben ezeknek a vádlottaknak a beszéd stílusa, típusa, kiejtése, illetve szofisztikáltságának a hiánya nagyon azonos szinten mozog. Tehát egy tolmácsnak fel kell tudnia ismerni azonnal a környezetében folyó kommunikációt, interakciókat, a testbeszédet, a szemvillanásokat, mindent, ami ott történik a helyszínen. Hogyha ezt egy mesterséges intelligenciával tolmácsolnánk le, vajon ugyanaz lenne az eredmény? És az egyik kedvencem a blattolás. Egy ugyanilyen tárgyaláson, ahol végig tolmácsolt az ember 6-7 órát, kiderül, hogy jaj, megérkezett a pszichiátriai orvosszakértői vélemény. Most ebben a pillanatban 6 oldal, tolmácsasszony. Tegye már meg, hogy leblattolja nekünk az egészet, olvassa fel. Soha senki nem látta még azt a szakvéleményt, elé tolják, le kell blattolni. Itt azért én megjegyzem, hogy nem kellemetlen, és nem szégyen az, hogyha az ember kér egy pár perc szünetet, egy kis türelmi időt, hogy legalább átfussa a szöveget, ha nem volt olyan mázlista, mint én, hogy én vettem részt még az orvosi vizsgálaton is, tehát nagyjából tudom, hogy éppen mi volt benne. Tehát van 6 oldal tömény orvosi szöveg, van 5 vádlott. Az, akire maga az orvosszakértői vélemény vonatkozik, pont azért került ez alá, vizsgálat alá, mert az értelmi képességei nem biztos, hogy megfelelőek arra, hogy értékelni tudja a helyzetét, illetve az általa elkövetett cselekményt. Na most, amikor ezt leblattolja az ember a bírónak, és a bíró megpróbálja elmagyarázni ugyanezt annak az egy darab vádlottnak, vajon szükségünk van empátiára? Vajon szükségünk van arra, hogy felismerjük a vádlott képességeit, és ahhoz képest adjuk át a szöveget? Mert én azt gondolom, hogy igen, és azt gondolom, hogy a mesterséges intelligencia erre egyelőre még abszolút képtelen. És utána jönnek azok a helyzetek, amik ugyan nem mindennaposak, viszont aki elég sokat tolmácsol, előbb vagy utóbb belefut, és bizony gyakran előfordulnak, hiszen ezek sorozatos pereknél, illetve persorozatoknál szoktak előfordulni. Amikor védett tanúkat hallgatunk meg. Amikor kihúznak egy kivetítőt, vagy egy nagyképernyős tévét, és megy rajta a hangyafoci. Nagyon jó, mikor már a 3. tartasz, Már érzed, hogy előtted is körök forognak, csukódik le a szemed, és a hangyafocit is végig kell nézni. Amikor bekapcsolják a védett házat, vagy azt az elkülönített termet, ahol a védett tanú van, akkor nyilvánvalóan nem ott a teremben hallod a hangot, hanem egy egészen más helyszínről szól, ami recseg, súg, búg, és nyilvánvalóan el van torzítva a kihallgatott személy hangja, hisz ez a lényege az egésznek, hogy felismerhetetlen legyen, sem képileg, sem hangilag. Hozzáteszem, az esetek 90%-ában vádlottak pontosan tudják, hogy kiről beszélünk, és vissza is szólnak, hogy jaj, te vagy az Jancsi, Józsi, akárki, de ettől még végig kell csinálni professzionálisan. És akkor ennek van egy szuper nehezített példája, amikor például a sértettet hallgatjuk meg, aki olyan sérüléseket szenvedett el a per tárgyával kapcsolatban, hogy eltorzultak a hangképző szervei, nehéz beszédű, dadog, sejpít, és még hozzá az eltorzított hang. Hát nem tudom, hogy a mesterséges intelligencia ilyen esetben hogy szólna vissza, vagy hogy kérdezne vissza, vagy hogy fejtené meg azt a beszédet, amit emberi füllel próbálunk azonosítani. Nyilvánvalóan ilyenkor sem szégyen visszakérdezni, mert életbevágó fontosságú információkat adunk át, amiket valóban években mérnek, és nagyon-nagyon empatikusan, professzionálisan kell hozzáállnunk, ami azt jelenti, hogy végtelen türelemmel kell hallgatnunk a meghallgatott felet, végtelen türelemmel kell vele egyeztetni, fel kell ismernünk azokat a korlátokat, amiknek a leküzdésében csak és kizárólag mi, a humán tolmács lehetünk a segítségére. És végül, de nem utolsó sorban, hoznék egy olyan példát, ahol nem hangyafocit látunk, hanem olyan képeket a kivetítőn, jobb esetben a pulpitusnál, a bíró előtt, papíron, ahol merényletek, gyilkosságok, balesetek fényképeit kell azonosítani, bárkivel, tanúval, vádlottal, akárkivel, és ebben kell részt venni. Ezek nagyon sokszor olyan képek, amik szó szerint gyomorforgatók, nagyon szomorú eseményekről készülnek, és erre gyakorlatilag nem lehet felkészülni. Igen, valóban meg kell oldani professzionálisan. Ilyenkor be kell, hogy lépjen az ember abban a formában a nyelvi közvetítésbe, ahol olyan embereknek közvetítünk, akik ezt a traumát vagy előidézték, vagy átélték. És mindegy, hogy melyik a két véglet, nekünk ezt fel kell tudni ismerni, professzionálisan kell kezelni, nem pityereghetünk, nem sírhatunk, nem vádaskodhatunk, hanem egyszerűen jelen kell lenni, és a jelennek meg kell felelni. Ennek az egyik legnagyobb kihívása az, hogy az ember ezeket ne vigye haza. Ami a tárgyalóteremben történik, az a tárgyalóteremben marad. Jobb lenne Vegasban, de ez a tárgyalóterem. Tehát azt gondolom, hogy az összes olyan példa, amit eddig bemutattam, és ez csak egy aprócska szelete az elmúlt 30 év termékének, az összes olyan példa, amit felhoztam, és gyakorlatilag minden nap előfordul a hatósági tolmácsok életében, kinek ilyen, kinek olyan van, akinek mindegyik, Az összes olyan példáról elmondható, hogy elengedhetetlen a tolmács részéről a környezetérzékelés és az interakció. Elengedhetetlen a helyzet felismerés és a kreatív probléma megoldás. Életbevágóan fontos a nyelvi pontosság és a szöveghűség. Nyilvánvalóan elvárt a professzionális viselkedés. Nagyon-nagyon fontos a rugalmasság, az etikus hozzáállás, a semlegesség és a titoktartás. Azt gondolom, hogyha ezt a listát végignézzük, a főbb alapelveket, akkor gyakorlatilag azt mondhatjuk, hogy persze ez nagyon jó, ezt egy humán tolmács gyakorlatban, élethelyzetben meg tudja oldani. És azt is mondhatjuk, hogy erre a mesterséges intelligencia gyakorlatilag mindre képes, vagy képes lehet. Csak ne felejtsük el, hogy amikor a hatósági eljárásban nyelvi közvetítünk, akkor olyan embereknek nyelvi közvetítünk, akiknek ez az egész létüket fenyegetheti, vagy segítheti egy ilyen eljárás. Itt biztos, hogy elengedhetetlen az empátia, nem hagyhatjuk figyelemen kívül a kulturális különbségeket, a kulturális ismereteket és készségeket. És a legfontosabb, nem hagyhatjuk ki az emberségünket. Köszönöm szépen a figyelmet!
Thank you very much, Eva. Can I ask the other three speakers to come and sit here for the questions? And to the audience, so it is time to ask questions. Most lehet kérdezni. You can ask your questions in English or in Hungarian. We just have one request. When you're asking your question, please wait for the microphone to arrive to your seat, okay, before you start speaking, because otherwise, you have a mic, okay, because otherwise the interpreters won't hear you. So, who has a question? Who would like to ask the first question?
Thank you very much. Does it work? Okay. Thank you very much for all of you. It was very interesting, and I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to monopolize the floor. So first of all, I feel that I must react to Agnieszka, but I have to admit that I can't find the words. So I was thinking it over, and all I can come up with as an explanation that, or rather just an observation, that all along the research of remote interpreting, that's what we see, that interpreters say one thing, and then researchers can't confirm it with empirical data. So it's very interesting, it's really food for thought. But I do have a question for Elizabeth. You spoke of your research setup, and when you showed the picture, you mentioned that where the interpreter was supposed to be, there was no one when they used the application. And I would like to ask if you defined the setup yourself, or if you let the participants choose where they wanted to sit.
Am I on? Am I on? Yes?
Yes,
No.
you're on.
We choose the setup. They were not allowed to choose. So it might have been different. And also we could, in some couples, we could see that they were collaborating more around the app because they were passing the app between each other and pointing to it. And in other couples, they did not. It was like, it was sort of glued onto the table.
And why didn't you let them choose?
Simply because of the eye tracking setup.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if I can ask one last question. Okay, thank you very much. And this question is to Alexandra. I found fascinating all you said about these new setups. And I was wondering that you said that now clients use AI for the more simple tasks or less complicated tasks, and human interpreters for the high-profile, really complicated scenarios. And that's why we see in other domains with AI that the entry-level jobs, so to say, are made by AI, and there is this concern that how would future professionals learn their jobs if there are no entry-level tasks to do. So what do you think about it? Is it a danger for the interpreting profession as well?
I wish I didn't have to answer this one. But yeah, we even, I think, had a conversation about this just lately. It's a brilliant question. Unfortunately, it's true. And I've noticed that at certain point, we lost kind of all those assignments that you could consider a bit easier, a bit more casual, a bit, maybe the ones that didn't need that much training in specialized terminology. And right now it's true that the assignments that are handled to humans, they require years of experience, knowledge of certain environments, certain procedures, setups. So it's true that there are hard times for younger colleagues. The profession is surely going to look completely different, but it doesn't mean that there is no place for young colleagues. So for sure it will look different, and the entry level is going to be a bit higher up, but I am absolutely certain that if more experienced colleagues find a space to also give younger colleagues some training, mock-ups, some sessions, dummy booths, it is going to be possible, but maybe not the same way as when we all started.
Thank you very much. I think it can affect the responsibilities of the training institutions.
Any other questions? Yes. You have
Thank
the
you so
mic.
much for the presentations. It was very interesting to me to listen to Agnieszka's and Alexandra's presentation one after the other. It kind of felt like they somehow, in a not so unexpected way, somehow complement each other. And I found it very interesting, I think many of us, the result of the test, which you said that in non-collocated booths, people feel less stressed than when they actually meet again. And it feels like it's somehow how our way to relate to our colleagues, how we see them, how we understand them, how we perceive them, how the utmost human part, the relationality of our jobs is kind of being somehow re-experienced due to technology or AI in a broader term, because it's also interesting what Marta said, that it's different experience, and then it's really a question, like really feels like there's some gray whirlwind kind of an area, which is very interesting to see that, whereas in a booth, you kind of look at your colleague as somebody with whom you're completely interdependent, you rely on each other, you help each other. That's the biggest, the beauty of our jobs, I believe. Then when you step out of it into a so-called virtual one single booth, you don't have the numbers. Well, how would you not be more stressed? That's very weird. And then when you go back again, because that's how I interpreted it somehow in this a linear way, like first you have the classic setup, the virtual booth, and then again the classical setup. And then as you are sort of reinserted into your natural habitat of working in a booth, you start to think about your colleague as somebody who's controlling you, because you start having more stress instead of enjoying it as a mutually learning experience, which it always is. So that's very interesting, and I was just interested in your view on that. If we're actually, is it due to that, or why? What could be the reason to that? And I'm also interested a little bit in the end user perspective, because also our job is very relational. So how do, if there is any research, I'm just an interpreter, I'm not keen into reading too much about all the scientific, very fresh and new research, but how do, or is there any kind of a comparative study of how end users interpret or experience, the difference between a virtual booth from a classical booth? So do they feel any kind of a difference, and what does their experience consist of? So how do we define a good end user experience? So what are the criteria based on which we can say this qualifies as a good job, not necessarily, I don't know, accuracy or something? Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you very much for these very interesting questions. Let me tackle the last one first. I'm not aware of such research. This is definitely a very good research question. Maybe Alexandra will have some input on that. When it comes to your first question, I was really surprised with the result as well. If the interpreters, had these interpreters been Gen Z, younger people who probably have less training in interpersonal relations, or because of the social social media, etc., and not having so many interactions with other people, that would be understandable. But these were pretty 40-year-old people who have had a lot of experience, so that was interesting to me. When it comes to the experimental setup, the sequence of settings was counterbalanced. So it wasn't like everybody started in the co-located condition, then went to the virtual booth, and then the non-co-located. It was all kind of jumbled so that you don't have precisely the effect of what you were talking about. So first you experience something, then something else, and then you are reintroduced into the kind of physical co-existence. So this was not because of the sequential experience. I think mainly that it was a new person that they had to work with, and it was much more difficult to kind of negotiate the cooperation with the new person in physical terms, as opposed to the not collocated condition, where you just have the input and you can ignore it. It was probably more difficult to ignore it when you have this kind of notepad being, kind of pushed into your visual space, especially for the interpreters who did not really want any feedback, because there are such interpreters as well, right? They just close their eyes. If they have some visual input, they are actually distracted. So that's my take on it, but I really don't know. Thank you.
I mean, well, to be honest, Etelka, fantastic question, but unfortunately I'm also not aware of any research on that particular thing. I just know that we would always say, we would focus on remote interpretation. So we would always say that we did a fantastic job when the client at the very end of the meeting, and I'm sure you also know this and experienced this, says, well, let's congratulate all our interpreters, and we get the ovation and people clap to the empty booths. That's how we can tell that, well, they cannot tell the difference. But whether there is research, I'm not aware of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, so if there are any PhD students in the room who are thinking about, or MA students close to graduation thinking about an interesting research question, here's one.
Thank you very much. Okay. I think we're going to close the formal discussion and maybe continue in the break, which is going to be announced by Anna-Marie.
Köszönöm, Réka. Tehát mielőtt belevágunk az izgalmasnak érkező kerekasztal beszélgetésbe, javaslom, hogy regenerálódjunk egyet, vagyis kávészünet, és szeretnék mindenkit megkérni, hogy 16 órára újra itt találkozzunk, ugyanis tartani kell a tempót. Köszönöm.
everybody who is still here with us. And I don't know why, but I'm always the last person. I'm always the last item on the agenda. So very quickly, I would like to introduce myself and then the panel participants. I'm Márta Segesi. I'm a senior lecturer here at ELTE. And this will be a panel discussion about how we really use AI in real life. So no cap, only real talk. And I would like to introduce the participant. So we have Eva Zilahi from the Hungarian Gazette Publishing and Legal Translation Center. Then next to her, we have Alex Lavani from the Hungarian Association of Interpreters and Translations, and he is the vice president, so he will be representing the professional organization, while Eva Zilahi will represent a language service provider and a state language service provider. Then we have Elizabeth Tiselius from Stockholm University, Agnieszka Chmiel from Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań, and Krzysztof Móricz, who is a senior lecturer at ELTE. And last but not least, we have Alexandra Smoczynska from Ola Interpreting, who represents the language service providers, the language industry side as well. So we have academia, we have interpreters, we have language service providers, we have state authority among us. And now I would really love to know how we really use AI in real life. And I have a set of questions, and maybe the first question will sound a bit strange or surprising, because first of all, I would like to know how you all use AI in your private life. So do you use it? And if you use, which tools, for what? So, or are you against using AI? I'm not sure if that works.
One.
Oh, okay.
Much
Thank
better.
you.
I didn't see the interpreters waving back in the booth, so who are great, by the way. So yes, I'm using AI in everyday's life, and I think it's a must. And you can use it for a lot of good things. Obviously, I do use it for translation, but primarily I use it to, well, I'm very bad at reading emails, for example, and while I'm driving, AI could read me the emails, could even give me a summary of the emails, and even offers me to answer. The only problem is that I can only respond in English, which might seem quite rude when you're having the correspondence with a Hungarian. So sometimes my response is just okay, or thumbs up, or something like that. So yes, I use AI. I use that extensively with translation. And one of our colleagues who's not here today, I've been testing a lot of AI solutions that you can use for interpreting, which is obviously TTS, text-to-speech, speech-to-text most of the times. But you also have some applications that can quite precisely and reliably do the speech-to-text and then do the translation, and then you have in front of you both the source language and the target language version of what was said. Well, you have to use that with utmost care because, as you all know, we're here, it's not precise and the mistakes are quite hidden, which someone who is not in the profession would not even realize. So, yeah, I do use it, sorry, that's what.
Okay, others? But first, let's concentrate on private life, so not the professional setting.
I can go next because I hardly ever use it in private life, although I agree that it's a must. Not for my private life, I mean, but, and the few times I use it, I'm often disappointed, especially at the chatbots. It doesn't give me the responses I'm expecting or I would like. I'm probably a bad prompter. But machine translation quite a lot, even in my private life, but not so much AI.
Thank you.
So does this work, or do you hear me? No.
Does it work?
Or now maybe?
No.
Okay. So I think the question is, nowadays it's more difficult to avoid AI than to use it. Because let's think of a very simple Google search. You cannot really avoid AI. Or these chatbots, you can avoid them either. So for me it's the question when and how I can avoid AI. For instance, I don't use GPS in my car. That means I check the route before and I use my natural intelligence, the topic of our session today actually, to get to my destination. So,
But why?
I like it this way.
Okay. Thank you for the detailed explanation. Agnieszka?
Yeah, me too. I use it much more in my professional life than my private life. I think in my private life, AI is used on me. For instance, AI tells me what to watch when I watch Netflix or what to listen to when I listen to music.
Oh, thank you.
I
Alexandra?
I can go next. It works, right? So Christoph said that he has natural intelligence and he doesn't need to use GPS. I don't have this natural intelligence. So I do use GPS, but I am also trying to rather avoid artificial intelligence in my everyday life, and whenever I am being pushed to use it by Google, by certain databases that I use, my main prompt is, could you please direct me to a human, or could you please just stop and just take it out of my screen? But it's inevitable to use it. I'm trying not to personally, but I believe that it's our everyday life and cannot do much. Yes, please.
I wanted you to finish. No, I just wanted to come back to what we were talking about, because private life, I didn't focus on that. I use it a lot, just like Christoph. I use it a lot for searches and also researches, and it is very, very unreliable. You also, the question was also what sort of AIs we use. I use Gemini, ChatGPT, and DeepSeek. The problem is that it's unreliable. I was just, when the Board of Peace was established and some heads of states and governments participated, and I was interpreting that. And I just wanted to make a research beforehand, and I asked who are going to participate, what are going to be the roles, and so forth. And then the answer it gave me was that there is only one EU head of state or government who's going to be there. And then I said, since when is Bulgaria not the member of EU, because Hungary is? And then he said, oh sorry, my bad. So really basic mistakes, so you really have to double check.
Éva?
Hát én a személyes életemben leginkább szintén keresésre, kutatásra, és leginkább helymeghatározásra használom szintén. A munkámon belül az én munkanyelveimen nem tartom megbízhatónak még, ezért nagyon sokszor félrevisz, és nagyon sokszor futottam bele abba, hogy próbáltam segítségként applikálni, és sokkal több munkám lett utána a javítással, illetve sokkal nagyobb figyelmet igényelt az, hogy a halucinálásokat, illetve a félrefordításokat próbáljam meg rendbe rakni, és sokkal több energiámat vett el, úgyhogy a munkámban még kevésbé használom, nyilvánvalóan, mint ahogy mindenki más a hétköznapokban ugyanolyan szinten.
Thank you. So Eva mentioned that it's unreliable and it makes you work even more. So those who said that use AI regularly, those who said that they try to avoid AI, is it the same reason, or do you have another specific reason for avoiding it?
No, I think it's a different thing. Avoiding AI in your private life in order to keep up your mental capacities and being sufficient in your job. So I don't really want to deliberately avoid AI as an interpreter by doing my job, by doing my research. I don't do that. Of course, I don't do that, and I learn how to use it, how to give them different or appropriate prompts, for instance. But if you can, so if it's not the success of your professional performance that depends on it, then let's try to avoid it. Let's keep up our human faces and stay just like we are.
Thank you. Alexandra, do you have something to add?
Well, I must say that sorry for using stereotypes here, but I think I'm staying in my Slavic core and I am a bit rebellious. I really don't like when someone is suggesting stuff to me and pushing them to me. And another thing that I don't really like is when someone always agrees with me. Come on!
Yeah.
No, so this fake, someone had, I think Eric had a presentation about this yesterday, about this fake, artificial way of always agreeing with someone who's prompting, right? So I believe that these things, but also in order for it to really work well, you need to spend a lot of time prompting well. So I'm not sure where's this time efficiency here.
Any other idea on the topic?
Also, maybe just the last point, this culture of agreeing, always agreeing. You have to consider that actually humans made AI, so maybe AI wants to deliver you or give you a safe space because it was trained like it.
You know, we always agree with Christoph in everything, so but this is true. So I can tell you examples about governments in office where the whole government agrees with the head, and they are not AI. So, but again, back to what Alexandra said about prompting. It's really an art. So that is something or a skill that you need to pick up, and then the result really changes. So it's not like 10% increase in quality. It's like up to 50, 60% increase in quality if you prompt the AI well. And the other thing is about agreeing all the time. You can also train the AI not to agree with you. You can also train it to be rude sometimes because it's always so polite,
But I'm already tired prompting my whole family and my partner. I mean, I don't want to prompt in my free time. Come on.
Okay, and the very last question about private life and AI use. Are you willing to pay for the AI that you use in your private life?
Sorry, I just referred to her for a second. She said something about the Slavic thing. I think I said something about the Hungarian thing. Hungarians don't pay for this kind of solutions. I think you agree.
I find that problematic both in my private and in my professional life, that I don't want to pay for that, really. And there's no one not even my universities, or my university is now paying for Copilot because it's part of MS365, but they don't necessarily, they expect us to teach it and to teach it to our students, but they don't necessarily pay for it. And also in my private life, I don't really see why I should pay for it if it doesn't give me any added value. And so far, for the private life bit, I've not seen the added value.
Alex?
I fully agree. Actually, you're contributing to building and developing AI by using it, and then why would you have to pay for it? There are certain things that I'm willing to pay for, I mean, with pleasure. Okay, let me say, it's not AI, but when you make a machine translation, if I use AI, I would use the free version, although I've tried the paid version, which gives you, much better in terms of quality. I mean, there's a huge difference between the paid and the free version in terms of the output. Bless you. In terms of the output, so the target language output. But for example, when it comes to DeepL, which is not the same technology, it is not AI, I'm willing to pay for it. I'm happy to pay for it. No problem. Much better.
Igen, én gyakorlatilag hasonlóan vagyok, mint az Alex, hogy amikor a munkámhoz kell felhasználni, például a DeepL-t, ezért én is nagyon örömmel fizetek, mert megkönnyíti a munkámat, de egyébként másért nem. És nem
So-
biztos,
sorry,
hogy
I
ez csak
didn't
ilyen
really
magyar.
catch the name of the software you mentioned. Yeah, DeepL. Okay, sorry.
It's my pronunciation, my bad, sorry.
I think there is an echo here.
No, it really is, yeah, it's difficult to hear.
Thank you.
Tehát, hogy gyakorlatilag ennyi, igen. Egyébként pedig megfordult a fejemben korábban a családom Európa szerte él, hogy esetleg érdemes lenne akár nyelvi kompetenciák leküzdésében is, de a férjem szerint nekem nincsenek ilyen problémáim, úgyhogy azt mondta, ilyenért nem fizetünk.
Christoph?
So one last thing that might be even more important in our professional lives, or doing quick DeepL translations just before 5 minutes before the presentation when we get the prep material finally, whatever. So confidentiality and non-disclosure, what do we feed AI with? Are these sensitive data? Are these private sets of data of our customers? So these are pretty important topics which we, I think, often forget about.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, just to summarize what you said about the use of AI, that it can be cumbersome, it makes you work more, it's de-skilling you, makes you forget certain things, and not a big added value. It's pushed on you, you don't want to pay for it. Now let's see if you use it for work, and if you have the same opinion on AI tools when it comes to a professional setting. So, do you use AI in work? And I would really like you to name the products, the softwares, the platforms that you use.
Okay, so I'll go first. For work that is dedicated to consulting, to projects that I work on, I use Google's agentic Gemini business suite, and I'm looking at interpreters. Got it. So this is something that I use, and we create different agents for different types of tasks to automate them a little bit. And of course, obviously, we do use different engines of different providers for machine interpretation, for testing it, and for different business development purposes. So yes, these are the things that I mostly use, and when it comes to our interpreters, they very, very frequently use a tool which is called Simo Notes. And maybe later, if we have the time, I'll also say something about this from client's perspective. Just as Agnieszka was also talking about it, Green Terp, although I'm not sure how much AI fuel it is. It does, right? So I would say these.
And I suppose you have a business subscription for
Yes,
these tools,
yes.
yeah.
So for Gemini, yes, and it is quite a game changer, but that's not my kind of private realm. That's the purely work-related subscription.
Thank you. Christoph?
Okay, so as for preparation for an assignment, I usually only use, I think, ChatGPT and Gemini, basically. But I would address another point as well. If you do remote interpreting as well, for instance, Zoom, they provide the transcription or even a translation already, and sometimes I do switch them on.
I am willing to pay for AI in my professional life, not in my private life. I use DALL-E for playing around with visuals and generating visuals for my presentations, for instance. I use GitHub Copilot for coding in R when I do statistics. And recently I've been experimenting with Microsoft Copilot a lot. I've created one agent so far, and this agent is my teaching assistant for my MA seminar, and it prepares some nice worksheets for my students. So that's a nice one. And I'm planning to work a bit more with developing further agents, and I think I might do it either in Microsoft Copilot Studio or some other application that would give me access to various models, because apparently they differ in what kind of work they support best.
Thank you. Isabel?
I feel tempted to have a teaching assistant, but I've not explored that yet. You heard already earlier that I'm a bit upset with my university who expect me to teach different tools and who don't pay for them. On the other hand, we teach ChatGPT, Perplexity, Copilot, DeepL and Google Translate and Reverso are not really AI, but they have AI parts of them. We teach them too, and we play around with Google Lens. It's really simple, but it's also fun. But when we teach them, we use the non-paid version, which is a pity for the students, but also we don't want the students to pay for them either, right? And I even instruct my students to only use, of course they can sign up if they want to, but I don't want them to be forced to sign up because they enrolled in the course. So we really only use the very basics, which is a drawback, but which I find is important for them, for not, it has to be your own decision on how much you want to sell out to these tools as well, even though we sell so much more without even thinking about it. But I think that you should still be able to opt out if you want to. Also many students ask about DeepSeek. We don't use DeepSeek. We are very suspicious for Chinese, but many of my students are not. Typically, I would say that depends on your linguistic background, but yeah, there we are.
But then, if I understand correctly, you use these things to show them to students, but you don't necessarily use them actively yourself.
No, once again, for my professional work, I'm often disappointed. Mm-hmm. Like when I wrote the book, I was so tired of my book, so it was really difficult to write the chapter abstract. So I was like, I'll sign up for a paid version so they can do my abstracts. And I started with chapter 1, and I was so disappointed, so that was it. We parted ways, and I wrote my abstract by myself. This is 18 months ago, so maybe it's better since then, but I'm not convinced yet.
Alex?
Well, I just fully agree with what Christoph said, so it's a memory test for you if you still remember. No, but actually, let me just say one more thing about that. Okay, so I use it for note-taking, rather experimenting with it. Glossary building is an interesting thing. It's a colleague of ours, all Hungarian colleagues know her. She studied it. It's not bad. It's far from, what you get is not really comprehensive, but there are some good things that you would have not thought of beforehand. So for glossary building, if you want to have a uranium mining glossary in 3 minutes, you just prompt, you would get the glossary, and then you would just, go through the whole thing and then build your own glossary. In case of presentations, I use it for image generation or picture generation. That's very good. And I think, Alexandra, did you mention Soniox? No? I thought it was that one. Anyway, so this is what we use it for. And we have a professional circle called The Circle. And we are sort of like early implementers, and we do experiment with all of these new solutions to find out which app could be used in our professional work and how. But it is too early to tell you definitive things about how we find them. Anyway, there is this, the one that I previously mentioned. This, as I said, would record, is a speech to text and record the speech to text, also give you a translation, which I don't like. I mean, rather use the source language, and then I will build my own target language, but I will talk about that later.
Hát nálunk céges szinten gyakorlatilag nem is tudjuk használni, mivel rettentes nagy mennyiségű személyi adattal és szenzitív adattal dolgozunk, ezért nálunk a hiteles fordításoknál teljesen kizárt dolog, hogy használjunk bármilyen nyitott eszközt. Szoktuk használni nagyon kicsi és korlátozott mértékben, és van is előfizetésünk a GPT-re, leginkább terminológiai glossáriumépítésre, terminológiai kivonatlanásra, illetve hogyha az ügyfél egy munkaanyagot kér tőlünk, amin nem érint szenzitív információkat, akkor annak nagyon-nagyon korlátozottan és tényleg minimálisan használjuk, de egyébként mi nem is tudjuk használni ezeket az eszközöket még. A GDPR mindenek fölött.
Thank you very much. And to be honest, I was a bit surprised to hear that two of you mentioned that you do use AI in the booth or during an assignment for note-taking or watching the live subtitling. And I would be really curious to hear about it, because I have to tell you that I have this feeling that not many people use AI during an assignment. A lot of people use them to prepare for an assignment, but when it comes to working in a booth or a consecutive assignment, they don't really use it. And I would be very curious about your experiences. So maybe Christoph, thank you.
So I want to refer to my own researches back in the day. I think you read my PhD thesis, so you know about this. As one of the most important findings was there was no AI back then. That there is a very big division between interpreters as for the topic using ICT tools while speaking. For some of the interpreters that is completely normal, they do it all the time, while others refuse it and detest it, basically. So it's similar for AI as well. We have to see that this, of course, is an extra effort in Mr. Gill's interpreting model, most probably. But still, many of our colleagues manage it, do it, and as for my experience, so I don't read the transcription all the time, but if I'm able maybe miss a name, miss a term, or yeah, exactly, then it's brilliant because it actually helps me out.
Alex, I would be really curious to hear about your experiences with the note-taking as well. If you could talk about it.
Really the same what Christoph said, I couldn't agree more. In terms of note-taking, so...
One of you can go home.
Okay, let's see whether it's consecutive or simultaneous. Simultaneous, it works well, but again, it is just like a backup. So it gives you some degree of certainty or peace of mind, just as Christoph said, if you miss something or, you know, but I would not use that as the reliable source of my target language translation. I'd never do that because, okay, let me just give you an example, although this, yeah. Déli harangszó, southern bell, déli harangok, azt hiszem, southern bells. I mean, no, the translation was southern bells all the time, and it was so annoying. It's bells at noon. And then it translated as southern bells. We have the same word for that. And then I was so pissed off that I asked the ChatGPT, I mean, all the different platforms, they all said southern bells. And I said, yeah, so you cannot yet, as of yet, you cannot rely on it, but it gives you an additional, you know, source of information. It is like a backup, but I would not recommend anyone to absolutely go for it. And this is the same, for the same reason, I do not think that a customer who is quality focused would replace human interpreting with machine interpreting or AI interpreting. I have a lot of reasons why I think that, and I'll probably tell you later if we'll have time. But the thing is, it all boils down to the thing that the new luxury is natural intelligence.
Yes, maybe I'll just say one final thing because I'll have to run in order to eat pierogi with my family in a couple of hours. Sorry about this. But actually, Alex, that was a very interesting thing that you said. And what I was mentioning before was an Gikai tool called Simo Notes, And this is a kind of a tool which you play live during a simultaneous interpreting assignment. And of course, as you can imagine, it kind of transcribes everything that is being said and it shows it to you, for example, on a tablet. And I remember that interpreters would always ask me to allow them to use it. And many clients would always say no because of confidentiality. But there was one, right? There was one client who actually agreed. And the reason why they agreed was because there was also machine interpretation in one other room, so no confidentiality, forget about that. But I remember that for that particular meeting, the client had a set of requirements how speakers should speak in order for it to work. And the client said that, well, because it has to work well, you speakers cannot make jokes, they cannot make any cultural references, they shouldn't speak too fast, and they should finish all their sentences. And my question is, what is the point of taking the floor then? Exactly. So on this note, I'll leave it.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Alexandra. It was so great to have you here. And have a nice trip home. Thank you. Yeah.
So this has nothing to do with interpreting per se, but one area where it has worked really well is to help our L2 Swedish students to write better. It's a very powerful tool for proofing your texts or giving you new ideas and so on. But we've also noted in this process, because we were really struggling with student text for the public service interpreters, who had many different L1s, and all of them were late L2 learners. So obviously, producing academic text is hard at that point. But also, it did not work just by telling them to use a GPT. It also requires a process of learning how to use it. And what cannot be taken away is find a Swedish-speaking friend who reads the final version. Because even if you improve it with a GPT, there's still, you also put a lot of artificial speak into it, which you wouldn't want. So, but that has, those students, I believe, have really gotten help with that.
Can I just come in for a,
Absolutely.
you know, Alexandra told me that whenever I quote her, she would deny everything, but she's gone. So I can do so. Now, intercultural issues, I love that, intercultural issues. So I know it is not really in line with our culture, but let me ask a question. The floor is open. So which are the jobs, in your opinion, that are going to be less affected by AI? I mean, jobs that are, you know, difficult to be replaced by AI. Just, you know, show of hands, tell me a few. Sorry? Kertész, gardener, okay. Hairdresser, okay. Plumber, yes, okay. Sorry? Okay. Okay.
Sorry, just a short reaction. They actually, I believe that AI and humanoid robots are related to each other, so I won't be that sure.
Yeah. So I consider them, you know, the same stuff. So, well, actually, according to one of the researches, the number one answer is politician.
Oh,
I mean, politicians are not going to be replaced by robots or AI anytime soon. Next one is priests. Okay. Diplomats, well, I think that goes hand in hand with politicians. And what is written here? Psychologists. Interestingly, psychologists, they are not in danger, but psychiatrists are. Because, well, it's obvious reason. And this boils down to what Alexandra has said, the cultural thing. It comes down to the human interaction. And the human interaction is very important in these professions that I mentioned. And I think that the human interaction is equally as important in interpretation. So, yeah, that much now.
Or do you have something to say? So coming back to our profession that we hopefully survive the upcoming years, I noticed that when you were speaking about tools you used and tools you loved to use, you only mentioned things that were developed for the general public. And do you use anything that was developed specifically to your profession?
We've tested some, and they didn't really work well. There's a Hungarian translation agency that developed one. It was working. Oh, there are two such agencies. They developed two different platforms. One was for OSI, so online simultaneous interpreting. One was for just when you're sitting in the booth, and then you have just another backup. They were working okay, but the off-the-shelf solutions that you can find, which are for the general public, do work better.
And why? Why do you think it's the case?
I think because they have more money. I mean, look, a Hungarian agency would develop it from their own money, and their resources are limited. Now, compared to Google or compared to whatever, that's nowhere near.
Others?
The Mabel AI that I talked about, I think that would be a really nice and powerful tool for the interpreter. I'm still doubtful about replacing the interpreter for that tool, but it is so impressive and so geared towards medical interpreting. And if you use it with the interpreter's experience as well, then all the medical terminology, all the hesitation about what a medication is called in one language or another would go away. So I think that I'm still quite impressed by the tool. I'm just hesitant about how to use it. But for interpreting, I think it could be a really strong tool.
By the way, there is Interprify, and there was another one that was working well.
Interpret Bank?
Yeah, okay.
Smarter?
Yeah, but then again, even though it works very well, and Interprify is actually, that was a huge endeavor to develop that, but where's the cutting edge compared to Zoom? I mean, the full version.
Christoph? So, but you mean remote interpreting platforms, not Kai tools? Interprify and Zoom, or do they offer Kai tools? Machine interpreting. Okay.
So this is basically how they try to survive by broadening the capabilities of the software, but I am afraid I have to agree because I don't think that they will survive in the long run because of the lack of resources. And for instance, as far as I know, Interpret Bank was sold by its developer and owner a couple of years ago. Is that right? I think so.
Okay. Eva, do you want to add something?
Tehát nyilvánvalóan, hogy azt hiszem, hogy maximum a Zoom az, amiben bele tudunk állni, és azt is csak nagyon korlátozott minőségben és mennyiségben. A mi tolmácsaink általában zárt láncon keresztül tolmácsolnak, ami egyértelműen kizárja minden nyitott lánc vagy nyitott eszköznek az alkalmazását vagy használatát. Pontosan megint csak azt tudom mondani, hogy GDPR.
And who developed this closed system? Was it your office, or is it a national?
Ez a nemzeti.
The wiki, or what's the name? It's a female.
Igen, ez a nagyon nem mindig tökéletesen működő, hangot torzító és minden lapozást beolvasó zárt vidilánc.
And it's good that you mentioned this because I wanted to talk about it. Also, Christoph mentioned the question of data protection, confidentiality issues, and I see that more and more clients are aware of this issue. And some clients use their own systems or develop their own systems. And first of all, I would like to ask if OFI intends to develop a system for, I don't know, remote interpreting, Kai tool, machine translation, anything, to accelerate the work or, I don't know, help with the workload. Yeah, so that's my first question.
Mondhatnám, hogy titok, de nem. Igen, vannak terveink. Elsősorban, ami nekünk nagyon fontos és szem előtt tartandó, az a hiteles fordítások elkészítésének a megkönnyítése, ami elsősorban abban nyilvánulna meg, vagy nyilvánul meg a terveink szerint, hogy nyelvfelismerőt sajátot próbálunk, illetve dokumentum iratfelismerőt, amit ha megpromptolunk, akkor pontosan fogjuk tudni, akár a legegyszerűbb módján is, hogy maga a szoftver felismeri az iratot. Ezen kívül próbálkozunk sablonizált iratok előkészítésével és kitöltésével, és nyilván ezt is teljesen szeretnénk automatizálni, aminek előzménye a nyelv és az iratfelismerő. Ezen azért már elég komolyan dolgozunk, még nem járunk a végén, de nagyon nagy segítséget adna önmagában az iratnak az előkészítésében, illetve az egységesített terminológiával lefordított iratok elkészítésében is, ami nem zárja ki az emberi ellenőrzést, tehát a végén mindig ott kell, hogy legyen az emberi ellenőrzés. Próbálkozunk ezzel, jól haladunk, remélhetőleg nagyobb eredményeket is fogunk tudni már majd prezentálni legközelebb.
It's exciting, very good news, thank you. And I would like to ask the others, if you have already met clients who were conscious about these problems or who had some specific needs or asked you to use specific tools or not to use anything at all. I can see Alex.
I'm sorry, but yeah. You have to, because this is an important message to everyone here, we need to educate the customers. I mean, they're not going to find out by themselves. We need to educate them about the pros and cons of using let me just stick to interpreting or interpretation. The downsides thereof and also the implications. And it's not only about how precise it is not only about how easy it is as opposed to, booking an interpreter, you just push the button and it's done. Well, it's not that easy, but then the implications. So there are certain areas where it is simply not working, like delegation interpreting, protocol interpreting, for the same reason as I said that politicians and diplomats are not going to be replaced anytime soon. And one of the reasons it doesn't work is because, sorry to say, but you will have to understand that it's cheap. So in protocol, it matters if something is cheap or not. Like, think of a plastic glass. A plastic glass cannot break. I mean, you can use it, it's light. And then still, when you can, you use a glass. Because if it's cheap, it looks cheap, it's not too, So in those fields, as I said, like protocol, diplomacy, etc., if you use machine translation, no matter how precise it is cheap. And the question is not whether you can replace interpreters with human interpreters with machine interpreters. The question is if you want to or if you should do that. And in certain cases you should not. Because what matters is not primarily how precise the source language, the output is, but rather if you have the human interaction, if you entertain, which is, it's my thing, if you entertain the public, which a human interpreter would do and the machine interpreter would not do. In addition to what Eva said, and it's very important about, and also Christoph, about the legal implications, like, you also asked whether there are developed closed solutions. Now the problem is that if it's cloud-based, if it goes out to the internet, then no data security. If it doesn't, then it's not as effective as the cloud-based ones, the open ones. So, it's either or. You cannot have both things at the same time. This is one problem. The other problem is data security, GDPR, as Eva said. And the third problem is legal responsibility. Think of a court interpreting, okay? And then if you misinterpret during a trial, you're responsible, either in person or the office, the agency is responsible. What about the machine translation? Who's going to be legally responsible? It is like the autonomous cars or the self-driving cars. I mean, you cannot overlook those things, and you have to educate the customer so that they'd be aware of that they need you as a human interpreter, no matter if they have the whatever application.
I agree absolutely, and to come back to what you said first, I think very often during interpreted events, people don't really want to communicate information, they want to send a message. Send a message about their own power, their own prestige, and that's why it's a problem if it's too cheap. And about these closed systems, for example, the European Commission has some digital tools that their interpreters are free to use. They can feed the meeting documents in these platforms, to these platforms, for example. So it exists, but it costs a lot. So that's why only the European Commission has it, or maybe the OFIE will have it soon. And do the others have met clients who have had their own system, or who had some who asked you to use a tool or not to use a tool?
I had an experience with an on-site remote interpreting that meant that we had to interpret remotely, so there were no actual booth, not the conventional technology for interpreting, but we had to go to the venue and interpret from there because of data protection issues. Yet another thing that, and they said this was necessary because, of course, external interpreters don't have a VPN connection at home.
I think what we might see in the future is a trend to have smaller language models like the one you mentioned in your, you used in your research, Elizabeth. And then when you have a very small model that is specialized for a specific thing, like medical interpreting, you might even have it in your phone. You don't have to use the cloud, and then the problem of confidentiality is gone. I recently met with a researcher who is developing the Polish large language model that would be very good apparently for automatic speech recognition in Polish. And I was talking to him about speech-to-speech translation, and he said, oh, that's very interesting. So maybe we'll just add this feature of speech-to-speech translation to our model. So his idea was that, translation is just an additional thing, right? So I think there's a lot still to be done when it comes to teaching people, clients, and the general public, the users as well, about machine translation and machine interpreting.
Isabel?
I have two comments, but it's not really, I'm not sure how related it is. But the first one is that it's a little bit difficult to understand the either-or issue. Why does the human have to go? Because, I mean, we still have pilots in airplanes, and there's an autopilot who can fly the airplane perfectly well. Nobody would expect that you clean your house with only a brush and a mop these days, right? You always have a vacuum cleaner at least. And everybody has tools, so why are not interpreters allowed to have tools, or translators allowed to have tools? I find it so difficult to understand why the human has to go. And it cannot just be, I also thought it was very telling, Alexandra's presentation, when it changed from budget to we have to show that we follow the times. because humans are presumably expensive, but not that expensive. And the final comment on that is that many strong messages nowadays about translation and interpreting being obsolete are coming from tech companies or CEOs in tech companies, And what they are doing is investing in their shares. So if they can convince the general public that there's no use to train themselves as becoming interpreters or translators because you can buy this tool instead. And it doesn't matter for them if it's true or not 6 months later, because the people have already bought the shares, and that was their goal at the point when they said it. So yeah, I like educating the user and trying to reach a bigger audience is of course very important. The question is, how do we do it? One step at a time. But
Alex, I can see you taking notes. Do you have something to add?
I just wanted to repeat the same thing, that whenever we educate the customer, and I can give you countless examples, like let's not name the university, they did one of their year opening ceremony. For years we had been interpreting those events, and then last year they decided to do that via AI, and it was written, it was subtitled, which is bad because it came in bursts, so not continuously with the text, but bursts. Second, you could not always see it from the rows behind. Third, instead of listening to something, if you also have to read it and understand it, and that's again a pain in the back. And fourth, it was not precise. And then I just talked to the customer and I said, well, look, I was there because my daughter just started university, and it really sucked. I mean, look, you as one of the leading universities, you should value yourself more than that. I know that was cheap, but look, you don't want to look cheap. Why don't you use human interpretation? Let alone the fact, so that's a good argument. Don't be cheap. You can tell this to the customer. Second, as Eva said and all the others said, data security. There's a conference. They're using machine interpreting, or interpretation, and then I would tell the customer, look, you charge the participants 30,000 forints to participate here, because you don't want your data, your business model, and whatever to be known by everyone. Now you're using machine interpreting, which means that you don't even need a hacker. Anyone who's skilled in IT could find everything that has been, machine interpreted. So why don't you take that into account? Data security, or the other one, as we said, legal responsibility. And these things actually do influence the customers in most of the cases. So this is the answer to the how.
Thank you. If you don't have anything else to say about the questions I asked, now I would like to give the floor to the audience, because I wanted to leave a couple of minutes for the questions. So now is the time. If I can already see that you do have questions, so maybe someone could help us with the microphone. Thank you very much.
While the microphone is coming here, the lady who wants to ask a question, TBE, it's you, yeah. Your question, your previous question was, what makes interpretation good? Now, one of the things is if you entertain the audience. Otherwise, if it's just a machine-like voice in your ear somewhere, you just fall asleep. And then it's much more important than the content and how precise it is.
I find it very inspiring, actually, that there are 3 actors that are flagging this profession are present at the table, and I think it's very relevant to ask this question, which is the fact that we are definitely relying a lot on AI, whether we admit it or not, when, for instance, as an agency, you are assigning, let's say, a translation for a professional to proofread it, I'm interested, what is your thinking process behind how you would price that job? I'm not interested in the price, I'm interested, what's your thinking process, what's the percentage, how you evaluate the expertise of the given person, because it has to be let's say, a very good professional just to be able to avoid the traps that AI very smoothly leads you into. And also for university professors, I think pretty much the same occurs when nowadays everybody, even for literary translation, they use AI, and then they just do something with it just to make it a bit something else, apart from the very obvious or something. And I'm just curious, how do you calculate the fact that AI is already used and is incorporated in students' everyday lives? And whether you, so what's your conscious thinking process behind how to not just reveal it and say, I know what you did, but how would you think differently because of AI when you try to show how much doubt we need to actually have and how much more expertise it is required and how valuable that actually is, that AI kind of tends to minimize nowadays and say, oh, you just read through it like 20% of the usual price, let's say. And another thing about the doubts, we heard about how useful AI is for glossaries. And I'm wondering whether you ever had doubts with glossaries, or whether, because in different contexts, that same thing is used differently, even within the same field, and whether you, even though it's very reliable, or you can sneak a peek while you're working, but whether you do the extra effort of just like verifying, going deeper. To what extent do you have that doubt actively guiding your preparation, let's say? Thanks.
Okay, who wants to answer first? Okay, so let's start with the price.
Nagyon egyszerű válaszom van, nálunk van egy osztály, aki ezzel foglalkozik. Tehát igazándiból én a minimálisat foglalkozom ezzel, viszont mivel mi AI alapú eszközöket, minimálisat használunk, maximum tradoszt használunk, ami viszont nem AI alapú ilyen szinten, mi ott súlyozással próbáljuk ezt a találatok mennyiségére és minőségére meghatározni. Pontosan a folyamatot nem tudom leírni, mivel a kollégám, aki ezzel foglalkozik, már elment, de igen, tehát, hogy foglalkozunk a súlyozás problémájával. Azt kell, hogy mondjam, hogy tapasztalatom szerint ez egy eléggé, neurotikus és nehéz folyamat, nehéz dolog. Talán az árhoz ennyit tudok hozzátenni, a glossáriumhoz egy kicsit talán többet tudok, mivel én magam is foglalkozom terminológiával és validálással is. Az én munkanyelvemen még mindig az van, hogy elég kicsi a merítés, ezért kevés találat jön, relatív kevés találat jön egy nagy nyelvi modellhez képest, és a validálás az egy borzasztó időigényes. Tehát részt veszek olyan kutatásban és olyan terminológia építésben, amiben többen dolgozunk. Én vagyok a validáló, és iszonyat mennyiségű munka, és nagyon-nagyon nagy felelősség ezeknek a terminusoknak a validálása, bármilyen mélységig, illetve van olyan ügyfelem, aki egészen speciális terminológiát használ. Az ő esetükben, amikor készülök egy-egy tárgyalásra, akkor előre kapok támpontokat, tehát háttéranyagokat, és bizony nem egyszerű a kikutatása, és sajnos megint csak azt tudom mondani, hogy kisebb nyelveknél ez nem működik annyira nem annyira jó, mint egyébként a nagy nyelvi modellekben. És még az előzőhöz így utólag jutott eszembe a tolmácsolás kapcsán, hogy például van olyan ügyfelem, aki tökéletesen beszéli mind a két nyelvet, üzleti tárgyalásokra szoktam elkísérni, használ tolmácsgépet a fülében, de én velem mindig letolmácsoltat mindent konszekutív módon, úgy, hogy ő neki ez nyilvánvalóan egy üzleti tárgyaláson ad egy laufot arra, hogy föl tudjon készülni a válaszra, illetve adekvát választ tudjon adni, át tudja gondolni, ne azonnal abban a pillanatban döntsön. És ez számomra úgy tűnik, lehet, hogy másnál is így működik, de ez egy ilyen újfajta trendé kezd alakulni, hogy az üzletemberek vagy nagyobb tárgyalásokon egyszerűen kvázi használják a tolmácsot, annak ellenére, hogy tökéletesen értik a nyelvet, vagy éppen semmi nagyon-nagyon fontos létjelenlétére nincs jogosultság, de azért, hogy ők kitolják a saját idejüket, a saját válaszuk meghozatalára, illetve a tárgyalásra, ezért többek között szintén használnak egy humán tolmácsot.
Yes, my PhD student, Aniko Németh, has just defended her dissertation about this subject. Someone else would like to respond, react? Thank you.
I try to instill a sense of doubt in my students when they use AI. I'm not sure if I'm successful or not, but I tell them that you should always do your fact-checking. And you can even, if you don't want to do the fact-checking yourself, you can even ask another chatbot to check what the first one has done for you in terms of glossary, for instance. When it comes to using AI for research, for instance, for writing their MA papers, I tell them that you should fact-check everything, because I will either know, because I know the literature, or I tell them to give specific citations, for instance, so page numbers, so that I can validate if what they're saying is true or not. Because it's very easy to basically accept what AI is giving you, and you really have to be doubtful. So I'm not discouraging the use of AI, I'm encouraging it. For instance, Copilot for improving the style of your writing, but I tell them that you should not use it for content generation, or if you do, you should definitely fact check, because the results might be disastrous, but we'll see how it goes.
We can, of course, not lie to our students and say that, oh no, this is just a passing phase, or that no, those novels that they translate with AI now, they will discover that that is bad and not do it anymore. So there's absolutely no question that the market is going to change a lot. And there's absolutely no question that I cannot tell my students what they will work with when they finish. But what we try to tell them when they come to information days and so on, because many come with these doubts. They like languages, but there's no future in languages, right? So what we try to say is that we cannot tell you what you're going to work with or what your work is going to look like, but we still will most likely need people who can handle these machines one way or the other. And translation, the fact that you manage different languages and on an advanced level and know how to work between them is an asset, even if we cannot specify exactly your work title when you finish.
I am very sorry to say that we have completely run out of time. So I would like to thank you all for coming. I think it was exciting, and I would love to continue, but we don't have any more time. So I would give the floor to Anna Maria for her closing remarks. And thank you once again.
Köszönjük szépen, igazán izgalmas volt és érdekes volt. Tisztelt vendégeink, kedves kollégák, engedjék meg, hogy zárásként átadjam a szót dr. Robin Edinának, aki összegezni fogja ezt a mai napot is.
I'm actually not going to attempt that, because that would be we'd have to sit another 3 days maybe. I think we've had a wonderful 3 days and we heard a lot of things. we need to process and we need to think. I'd like to encourage you not to forget your thoughts that you had, the ideas and initiatives that occurred to you while you were sitting here. You can actually watch the presentations and the discussions again. In the program you found the streaming link embedded, so if you later on click on the same link, you'll be able to watch the presentations again, and I would like to encourage you to do so and encourage your colleagues to do so as well, because I think important things were said, and I thank you all for saying them. Thank you all for hearing them and listening to them, and I would thank you all for spreading them as well, teaching them to your colleagues, to your students, and I'd like to thank the interpreters who are visible in the booth. I'd like to thank our international guests for coming and enriching our discussion here, and I hope we'll continue next year here in Budapest or some in other place. So I thank you all and have a lovely, relaxing weekend.
Zárásként akkor én is megköszönném a tolmács kolléganőknek az egésznapos munkájukat, és hát kedves kollégák, tisztelt résztvevők, kedves vendégeink, mai napunk végére érve egyértelművé válik, hogy bár a technológia rohamléptekben fejlődik, a természetes intelligencia, az önök szakértelme, empátiája és a kulturális érzékenysége marad a professzionális nyelvi közvetítés tartóoszlopa. A mai előadások bebizonyították, hogy a gép az ugyan segíthet, de csak az ember képes a valódi kommunikációra. Láttuk, hogy a professzionális nyelvi közvetítés nem csupán szavak átültetése, hanem a stratégia döntéshozatal, amelyhez elengedhetetlen a humán intelligencia. A jövő nem a gép vagy az ember kérdéséről szól, hanem a gép és az ember együttműködéséről. Az emi adhatja a vázat, de a lelket, a kontextust és a felelősséget mi, szakemberek tesszük hozzá. Maradjunk mi a technológia tudatos karmesterei, akik tudják, mikor kell a gépre támaszkodni, és mikor kell kizárólag a saját szakmai ösztöneinkre. Használják az új technológiákat bátran, de soha ne feledjék, a valódi megértés hídja az az emberi elmében épül fel. Köszönöm előadóinknak a betekintést a jövőbe mutató gondolatokat, önöknek pedig az inspiráló jelenlétet és a kitartó figyelmet. Kívánok jó hétvégét mindenkinek, és kellemes, közelgő húsvétot. Isten áldjon mindenkit!